Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Agape Guys Show. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. I got to tell you, I got a great show for you today, and I think you're all going to enjoy it. I'm going to be speaking to a special guest who's written a really great book that I'm glad to share with you folks. The book is titled, Why I Had to Consider Universal Reconciliation. I've got a slight glitch, though. My guest has received a lot of verbal and psychological abuse from their family and acquaintances due to their beliefs. So they don't want their true identity to be revealed. As a matter of fact, they didn't feel comfortable putting their name on the book either. The book lists the author as an anonymous follower of Jesus. So we're going to disguise our guest's face and their voice. So let me show you a little trick that I'm using to disguise their face. If you go on Zoom, you can see that they added a new feature in the video settings. You can now use a cartoon avatar face to cover your face with. Let me show you what it looks like. See, there I am as a cartoon. See, the head moves back and forth when I move, and even the mouth moves when I talk. Okay, let's turn that off. There we go. The book we're going to be going over today is titled, Why I Had to Consider Universal Reconciliation. It's somewhat like a Christian apologetics book, but it gives evidence that supports universal reconciliation. The subtitle of the book is The Easy to Understand Reasons Why and the Various Issues I Found Along the Way. So it talks about other issues as well. And the other main issue is that it gives evidence against a belief in eternal conscious torment in hell. So this might be a controversial episode, but I think it's worth looking into these issues. It's definitely worth looking at the evidence to see where it points. So without any further delay, let me introduce you to our guest. Here's our guest. Hello, Anonymous, and welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
I gotta say, I'm glad to see you and talk to you as well. I get the feeling that this is going to be a really great conversation. I really find the things you write to be very thought-provoking and eye-opening. Let's talk about your first book, which is titled, Why I Had to Consider Universal Reconciliation. By the way, its subtitle is The Easy to Understand Reasons Why and the Various Issues I Found Along the Way. I noticed in the book that you changed some of your beliefs about God's love over time. Could you tell us about the things that happened in your life that led you to learn about God's love and universal reconciliation? Or what were the circumstances surrounding that transition, and what happened after that?
Well, I grew up in a middle-class family in the U.S., but when I was young, we attended legalistic church groups. Looking back on it, I'd say those church groups had a lot of problems. There was an excessive amount of judging and condemnation, as well as verbal and psychological abuse. I think I've even heard that some of those church groups have closed and aren't around anymore. I learned a lot through the years, yet as I became an adult, I left the abusive church groups that my family had attended. I tried to find another church group to attend, but I had to leave those church groups because they had similar problems. One day I met some people who taught me about God's love, and it made a really big difference in my life. I was never the same after that. I then found that church leaders at the church we attended didn't believe in God's love. Those church leaders made it clear that they didn't like me and my beliefs about God's love. So they got a bit abusive toward me and my friends who believed in God's love. I ended up leaving that church and visited other churches, but I never found one I was comfortable attending. I couldn't find any church groups that believed in God's love. I gave up looking after a while, but that led me to set out on a journey through life. I read a lot of books and learned a lot of different things over the next few years. I found videos by Steve McVey and a few other people that believed in God's love, and I watched a lot of those videos. Steve McVey was the first person I saw that started talking about universal reconciliation and teaching about it. I then got into an online group where a lot more people were talking about universal reconciliation. As I learned about the evidence for universal reconciliation, I started to wish that there was a book about it. I couldn't find one, and couldn't find anyone that wanted to write a book like that, so I tried to gather my thoughts and figure out how to write a book about it on my own. So, one day, I started working on the outline for the book. Then I started writing the first chapter and researching the evidence for universal reconciliation. A lot of the book is basically the story of my life and the things I learned along the way. So, I enjoyed writing it, because it was about the stuff that I had learned in life.
Wow. So one of the main things that led you down the path towards universal reconciliation was learning about God's love.
Yes, most definitely. Learning about God's love made a big difference in my life. Once I learned about God's love, my life was never the same. It was a bit of a slow learning process, though. It took me over 10 years to stumble through life and learn about universal reconciliation and God's all-inclusive love.
What led you to write the book, or what inspired you or motivated you to write it?
Once I started to believe in universal reconciliation, I wondered if anyone had written a book that gave evidence for it. I wanted to be able to defend my beliefs if my family criticized my beliefs or if anyone else criticized it. I wanted verifiable documented evidence that was easy to find and understand. I looked around the internet and social media, but I couldn't find any books about it. So I wanted to write my own type of apologetics-style book about it so I could defend these beliefs. My desire to have a book like that kept increasing over the next year or so. Then one day, as I was about to take a shower in the morning, I thought of an outline for the book. I typed out an outline for the first half of the book on my computer. I thought about the second half of the book while I was in the shower. When I was done, I went back and typed out the rest of the outline for the book. I then tracked down the evidence and research that backed it up. So I wrote out the rest of the book over the next few weeks. One day I let Paul Gray proofread the book, and he really liked it. He said it was really good. I must say, I really miss Mr. Gray and his fun-loving and enthusiastic attitude.
Yeah, I really enjoyed interacting with Paul Gray, too. I gotta ask, though, were there any other things that led you to believe in universal reconciliation? I mean, I noticed you mentioned a few other things, and that you also started to have doubts about eternal conscious torment in hell. What about those things?
Yeah, that's correct. Some of it was because I had learned about God's love, and I had also seen a few other questionable things in several church groups. I learned that most church groups seem to teach people to live by works instead of the Holy Spirit's guidance. I also started to notice other misleading teachings that the Bible didn't support quite as well as some pastors said it did. I also saw a lot of manipulation and deceptive practices by a lot of preachers, and I didn't like it.
I also had a few friends tell me they didn't believe in hell anymore, and I wanted to research the subject for myself. I wanted more information on the subject before I made up my mind.
A short time later, I also heard the author, Wayne Jacobson, mention on his podcast that he no longer believed in the traditional teachings about hell.
I also read the book, Beyond an Angry God, by Steve McVey. I especially took a close look at the chapter he titled, Not Your Grandmother's Hell. It was quite an eye-opening experience. I wanted in-depth information, so I looked for a book that lots of people pointed to on this subject. That search led me to the book, Hope Beyond Hell, by Gary Boecheman. I went through the book, Hope Beyond Hell, and thought the book was very well done. Gary Boecheman did a very good job. It was so good that it was almost overwhelming. It was rational and reasonable. He used Bible verses that were all used in their proper context. I couldn't find anything that was outlandish or unreasonable in the book. That book opened my eyes to a vast amount of information on this subject. I then started to wonder where unbelievers go if there's no hell. I don't have a college degree in parapsychology, so I didn't know what to think. I wondered if unbelievers died and ended up as ghosts that simply lingered around here on Earth. I wondered if that might explain many of the stories about hauntings. I also wondered about near-death experiences where almost all people seem to go into the light. Even people who said they had a dream where they went to hell ended up getting out of hell and going into the light. I've also seen people say that NDEs can't be true, but I've seen other people say the proof is in favor of NDEs. I just didn't know what to think. I wanted to look further into these issues, so I started to study universal reconciliation, which is also known as ultimate restoration. As I did a lot of studying and looking into the subject, I found a lot of evidence to support it. I also started to think that these issues about hell and universal reconciliation went together. I compared the main ideas of both of them together. The ideas seemed to point to the same story, which was that God was more loving than I had thought. It seemed like, if hell isn't real, then universal reconciliation had to be real, and if universal reconciliation was real, then there couldn't be eternal torment in hell. Both concepts seemed to guide me away from a belief in eternal conscious torment in hell. Then as I got a better grip on the ideas in the book, Hope Beyond Hell, I saw that universal reconciliation was rational and logical. As I saw more and more evidence, I could only conclude that universal reconciliation must be true. I had gone through apologetics books, and now I was starting to see a good defense for universal reconciliation.
Okay, well, what are the main bits of evidence that led you to believe in universal reconciliation and could lead other people to believe in it?
There are a few good strong pieces of evidence that point in this direction and support universal reconciliation. The first piece of evidence is the many documents written by the early Christians who stated that they believed in universal reconciliation. Many of them also wrote that they either didn't believe in eternal conscious torment in hell, or that any type of punishment in the afterlife wasn't meant to last for all eternity. The second piece of strong evidence is that there are over 30 different types of universalism, and people who believe in universal reconciliation are only one of those groups. It should also be noted that those who believe in universal reconciliation are not Unitarians and don't hold to the same beliefs as the Unitarians. Many who believe in universal reconciliation believe in the deity of Christ and aren't like the Unitarians who reject the divinity of Christ. The third piece of evidence is the large amount of biblical evidence. Universal reconciliation is biblical, and the Bible directly supports it in many Bible passages. In chapter 4 of my book, I show where I found a couple of lists of verses that a couple of different guys assembled. One guy lists 70 supporting verses, and the other lists 100. The fourth piece of evidence is that universal reconciliation correlates with God's nature, which is love. I list 25 Bible passages that support this and point in that direction. This includes 1 John 4, verse 8, and 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8. The fifth piece of evidence is that the Bible shows that we can't acquire salvation on our own, or by our own faith. The verse Romans 3:22 shows that it's Jesus' faith that gets us to the good place. It also shows in Ephesians 2 verses 8 through 9 that it's not our works or our faith that gets the job done. So people don't have to put their faith in God in this lifetime to go to the good place. God's love remains everlasting and unconditional. As 1 Corinthians 13 verse 5 shows, love holds no record of wrongs. So that holds true for all time. God's faithfulness stays true for eternity. So, we are all guaranteed to go to the good place in the end. The sixth piece of evidence is that reconciliation with Christ has nothing to do with our works of self-effort. So it couldn't have a basis in our own efforts to have faith either. Nor is it incumbent upon our choice to surrender our lives to God. So it isn't based on our faith, but it must be the faith of Jesus, which the Bible says extends to all people for all time. The Bible has many references to Jesus saving all. John's Gospel shows that Jesus said, "If I am lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself." That means all humans will be drawn to him. So everybody is included, and everybody gets to go to the good place. The seventh piece of evidence is that there are many legitimate reasons to reject a belief in eternal conscious torment in hell. Biblical references to hell are references to the grave, and God's processes of helping us get to know His love. So the lack of a hell seems to point to universal reconciliation as the only reasonable option to consider.
Wow, that's a lot of great information. Well, what about the subject of hell you mentioned? What do you think are the main pieces of evidence against the existence of a literal fiery hell with eternal conscious torment?
There are several pieces of strong evidence against the idea of eternal conscious torment in hell. The first is that hell is inconsistent with, and doesn't align with love being God's nature as it's revealed in the Bible in 1 John chapter 4 verse 8 and 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verses 4 to 8. The second is that it seems extreme and excessive to punish someone for eternity due to 70 or 80 years of misbehavior. That would be far too harsh and cruel and inconsistent with God's loving nature, His mercy, and the fruit of the Spirit. Especially considering the Bible mentions the fruit of the Spirit to be things like kindness and gentleness. The third piece of evidence against eternal conscious torment in hell is that the Old Testament never warned about it. So why should those people suffer for eternity if they never got a fair warning about hell? That shows another form of inconsistency. Some people might say that hell was mentioned in the Old Testament in the King James Bible, but it was actually the word Sheol that was used. The word Sheol is a term for the grave or the general subject of death. So we're back to the main premise that eternal punishment was never mentioned or referred to in the Old Testament of the Bible. The fourth piece of evidence against eternal conscious torment in hell is that all references to hell in the New Testament have a long list of big problems. Here's a few of the big problems. 1. References to hell are completely missing in the ancient Greek manuscripts. 2. References to hell were added to the Latin Vulgate and transferred into many modern translations. So those references aren't in the ancient manuscripts at all. 3. Some references to hell in the New Testament were references to the grave, where you bury a dead person's body underground. 4. Some references to hell were actually Gehenna or the Valley of Hinnom. They weren't references to eternal punishment, but were about God setting things right in people's hearts and minds, whether in this life or the next. Some were also referring to people's hearts getting set right in this life, so the kingdom within could come alive. So, without the eye-opening experience of getting to know God's love, the kingdom within doesn't get the chance to come alive. So our lives here on earth are basically just like trash that is thrown on the trash heap in Gehenna. So it wasn't about eternal torment in the afterlife. It was a reference to this life being meaningless or unproductive if you don't get to know God's love. The fifth piece of evidence against eternal conscious torment in hell is the further inconsistencies in references in the New Testament. These are regarding phrases used in the New Testament, such as references to burning in the afterlife, the lake of fire, and the word torment. Here are a few examples of this. 1. Some of these phrases refer to God purifying people to help make them fit to enter heaven. 2. Some are references to God reconciling us to Himself by helping us get to know His love. 3. Some references are about God helping us realize bad things happen in life because people misunderstand His love. 4. Some references point to God restoring all things to the way they should be. So it isn't about punitive punishment or retribution. It's about restoring all things to goodness, healing things that hurt us, and fixing any problems that caused our life to go off track. This is the only way many people could ever get the opportunity to enjoy God's love and goodness.
Wow, that's some really great stuff. There's some really good, thorough answers there, too. I can see you've put a lot of thought into this, and you've done a lot of research, which you list in the book.
Yep, that's right. I had a friend tell me that they found my book to be at least as well researched and as well referenced as many other major books like it. I wrote the book to be easy to read for the average person like me, who doesn't have a doctorate degree in theology. Yet I list plenty of evidence and research in the book in case anyone wants to challenge these beliefs or take a deeper look into this subject.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it real easy to read so lots of people could read it, understand it, and get a good grasp on this subject. Could you also tell the people watching about some of the other sources of information you refer to at the end of your book?
Yep. I also list a lot of challenging questions that people often ask about universal reconciliation, and I give the answers to those questions. I also give a few other helpful hints, and list other books that are helpful with the subjects of universal reconciliation and eternal conscious torment in hell.
I really like that you referenced some of those other helpful books as well. Let me ask you this. Did anything else happen that led you to a point in your life where you learned about God's love?
A lot of it came down to seeing preachers teach people to live by works. That was something that made me realize that there were some major problems in the churches I attended. Beyond that, it was when I started seeing a lot of spiritual abuse in the form of verbal and psychological abuse. I saw this from a lot of church leaders in several different church groups. I don't blame them though. They were likely never taught the truth about God's love. They're simply trapped in a system that keeps them running in circles with no clear way to escape the rat's maze that they are living in.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those things as well. Let me ask you this. Are you working on any other books?
I'm currently finishing my memoir. I'm also thinking about updating this book about universal reconciliation. I've also started working on a book about God's love. I want the book about God's love to be something that's appealing to a large audience. I want people from different denominations to feel comfortable about the subject and the material.
Wow, those sound like some really interesting things. Maybe some things I'd like to check out when you release them. On a slightly different note, I'd like to ask you another question. Have you recently read any good articles, blogs, microblogs on social media, or seen any good videos lately?
I'm always challenged by people like Richard Murray and Keith Giles. I also love the things written by Wendy Francisco.
Yeah, I love a lot of their stuff as well. Is there anything else you'd like to tell people that are watching the show?
Just learn about God's love and relax into it so you can live it out.
Wow, that's some really good stuff. I totally agree. I really need to have you back on the show sometime. I'd love to talk some more about other stuff you've written and stuff that you're working on writing. So the invitation is open if you want to come on again.
Sounds good. I'd love to come on any time. Just let me know.
That sounds good to me as well. I'll have to set up something so you can come on the show again. I really enjoyed our conversation here today. Folks, I got to tell you, I really like this book and want everyone to know about it and know about the evidence for universal reconciliation. I'd also like for you folks to see the other subjects he talks about and the evidence he gives for discarding a belief in eternal conscious torment in hell. By the way, if you couldn't tell, this whole interview was done with somebody I know. That person can't put their name on the book because they'll get a lot of verbal and psychological abuse from their family and acquaintances. This person is very close to me. I'll give you a hint as to who this person is at the end of the closing credits. So keep on watching. If you appreciate content like this, and that I keep the focus on God's love, I'd like to ask for your help. I'm trying to get this show going on Grace Awakening Network, and I need your financial help to make it happen. Now, if you don't have the extra money right now, and you're struggling just to pay for groceries, then don't worry about it. Yet if you do have the finances to help, I'd appreciate the help. You can make a donation to my PayPal account and click to mark it as support for the Agape Guy Show. My PayPal account is paypal.me/Lenny Manning, as I've got it shown on the screen. If you wish to support me monthly, I've also added the monthly subscription button, which will make it automatic withdrawals for you. Like I said, if you don't have the spare cash right now, then don't worry about it. I don't want to put an extra burden on you. I hope you can see that I'm trying to be honest here. I don't like to have long, drawn-out emotional pleas for money, which usually comes down to emotional manipulation. I don't like that stuff either. I just hope that I can bring this show to a vast audience on the Grace Awakening Network so I can share God's love with as many people as possible. I'd just like to say for now, I hope to see you in the next episode of the Agape Guys Show. See you later.